Hey guys, I just went ahead and finally beat Final Fantasy 16. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what the hell? Didn't that game come out like 6 months ago or something like that? Yes, it absolutely did. I actually bought it right when it came out. And then I bought a PS5 to play it. But unfortunately, the PS5 delivery got delayed for like over a month. It just kept getting delayed. And then by the time it finally got here, a bunch of other stuff came out. But I do want to go ahead and try and review and put out reviews for all the games that I missed in 2023. So I've been kind of speed running that backlog, and I'm gonna put out a couple reviews in the next few days here before New Year's to try and get those games reviewed. But anyway, let's get into the pros, the cons, and then my final thoughts on Final Fantasy 16. The first pro that I'll say right out the gate is that graphically the game is quite impressive. Not the performance, but the actual graphics are quite impressive here. The texture work, especially on all of the character models, is quite good. I mean, they do still have that Final Fantasy face type, very smooth Barbie doll-esque skin. Not you're not seeing pores and stuff on the characters because it is still that, I'll say, stylized, that Final Fantasy stylized aesthetic. But all of the models look great. The lighting looks phenomenal. The world looks really, really sharp. Like the foliage and everything is great, and then the lighting in the interiors and even a lot of the like reflections and stuff, very surprising. I mean, you can see in the gameplay here, like the water kicking up and everything. The particle effects are also insane in this game, and honestly, a little bit too much at some points. There are some points, especially when you're throwing out a lot of abilities and the enemy's throwing out a lot of abilities, where the particle effects are just going so wacky mode that you cannot see fucking anything. It gets a little silly. But I still really, really enjoyed every like area that I was looking at, and even if I couldn't see at times, it was at least very pretty with what I couldn't see, with all the embers and sparks and everything flying about. So it's definitely a pleasure to look at from an actual graphics and fidelity perspective. I also think the sound, I mean, this game just won the Video Game Award for Best Soundtrack. And at first I was, before playing the game, I was like, oh man, Alan Wake 2 got robbed. Alan Wake 2, I've actually listened to that soundtrack, I don't know, probably like 24 times since I finished the game. I think Alan Wake 2 has a banger of a soundtrack. And I was like, there's no way Final Fantasy 16 has a better one. Like, Alan Wake got robbed. I was fucking wrong. And I'll admit it, I was fucking wrong. The soundtrack for Final Fantasy 16 goes hard as hell. I wish there was some way that I could actually properly listen to all of it, but it's really, really good, dude. Like, I cannot complain. It is really, really solid. Especially like the boss tracks go so incredibly hard in the game. Yeah, the music is just bangers. But honestly, I can't think of a Final Fantasy game with bad music, so it kind of makes sense. But really, really good. The voice acting as well. It's interesting because it's set in sort of like a medieval Europe type of world, I would say. And as a result, the English voice acting actually feels like the definitive way to play the game because, I mean, it's like I said, it's like a Europe type of country. And so everybody's, British or Scottish or Irish or whatever, right? Everybody's got their little accent going on, and they have some heavy hitters. Like, even in the side quests, some of the side quest characters, I'd hear them, and I'm like, wait, that's the fucking voice actor from Game of Thrones, dude. That's that guy from Game of Thrones. Like, I was picking out voice actors and stuff. They have some real heavy hitters, and I think especially Clive, dude. Clive goes hard in the voice acting. Like, this guy, most of the time he's just there sounding like Batman. He's like, we have to destroy the mother crystals. Oh, I guess he's British. So it's like, we have to destroy the mother crystals, right? But then, like, when something emotional is happening, you'll hear those voice cracks. You'll hear him go higher pitch, which just naturally happens. I've seen some people complain about it. They're like, why does he sound like, deep and gruff? normally, and then when he gets emotional, he goes high pitched, and dude, that's just how it happens, right? Like, as human beings, our voices fluctuate wildly depending on our emotions. And you'll know that if you've ever heard me. If you've ever watched a stream and you hear me scream, it sounds like a little girl screaming, right? But normally in a video where I'm just talking or whatever, I'm level-headed. I like to think that I can pass, as a dude, at least from my voice. So I think the voice acting is incredibly hard in the game. I think that Clive especially goes great. I'll say I wasn't the biggest fan of Jill's voice acting, but that's about it. I thought everybody else did a really good job. And it's nothing against Jill's voice actress. It's just Jill's actual voice just doesn't really fit her face to me. I don't know if that's just me, but she has a voice of like a very elegant, like in her 30s woman. And then I look at her in the game and I'm like, she's like in her early 20s and looks like a little girl to me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just becoming a boomer or something. But yeah, all of the sound is done very well in the game. I also enjoy the first, like, 95% of the story. Like, I really like the story up until the very end. Like, the whole last mission, no spoilers or anything, but the video game thing where they're like, get all your affairs in order, this is the final mission type shit. That final mission, I wasn't a big fan of. I did not actually like it. And I can't really go into it, obviously, without going into spoilers, but I wasn't a big fan of the ending of the game, but everything up until the ending, I actually was thoroughly enjoying. I do think that they reused some story beats from past Final Fantasy games a little bit here. So if you have played Final Fantasy games, a lot of the twists and turns and stuff you'll probably see coming like 17 miles ahead of time. But I still had a wonderful time going through the story. The main story, I should say. We'll get to the side quests and stuff in the cons. But yeah, I think it's paced properly. If you're just doing the main story, it's like 20 to 25 hours. Which I think is a good length. And then if you're like me and you did every single side quest, right? You did every single trial. You did everything. Then it took me like 83 hours. So, a pretty solid chunk of change. But that's telling you quite a bit. If I wanted to do all the side stuff, it's telling you quite a bit about the actual quality of the experience. The final thing I'll touch on here in the pros is the gameplay. Now, this is going to be very divisive because this is not really a Final Fantasy game, man. It's certainly not turn-based. You don't even really have to do the Final Fantasy VII thing where you're building up ATB in order to use abilities, right? There's no mana or anything like that. All of your abilities are on cooldown. And as a result, we've seen a lot of very mixed takes on it. But here's my take as somebody that's not necessarily a Final Fantasy fan, but I love, stuff like Devil May Cry, right? These freeform hack and slash action games. I absolutely love and adore it. I've tried so many times to get into Final Fantasy, I tried the OG Final Fantasy VII and could not get past, when you get your first Chocobo, basically. I just totally fell out of the game. Played the whole intro and liked it, and then got to that, and I just hate random encounters, man. I despise random encounters. So I couldn't get into that. I tried Final Fantasy X when I was a little bit older and couldn't get into that. I tried 13 as an adult and just thought that the intro went on for way too long. It's like a 3-hour, 4-hour intro or something, it feels like. Like, it's insane, dude. And then, I have Final Fantasy 15. I unfortunately never got around to playing it because I waited for the PC release, and then by the time it came out, other stuff had came out. And then I did play through all of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I enjoyed it enough. I actually quite enjoyed my experience. I gave that game an 8 out of 10. I did a review on that. And, but I've never really been sucked into, like, the actual gameplay of a Final Fantasy. right? And this is the first one that really sucked me in. I love the gameplay here. Now, I've heard people say it's like Devil May Cry. It's not. It doesn't give you nearly as many tools at your disposal as the Devil May Cry does, right? Or really any like Bayonetta or anything like that. Even Hi-Fi Rush, I would argue, gives you more tools, right? So I don't think it gives you as many tools, and I don't think the combat is nearly as free form as a lot of people say, but it's certainly far less restrictive than a Final Fantasy VII Remake or, God forbid, the turn-based games or the tactics-based Final Fantasy games. It's certainly more free form when compared to those, right? And really what it oftentimes comes down to is just whittling away your targets stagger, and then once they're staggered, you just dump every ability in your at your disposal into the enemy and try and do as much damage as possible. But the thing that I really like is, since it is a cooldown based system, there's a lot of abilities that, depending on how you use them, will actually have faster cooldowns, and this allows you to use them regularly in a combat encounter, in a single fight. It's not like you get one ability in the fight and like, okay, I use that one ability in this fight, I'll have it for the next fight or whatever like that, right? Like, one of the abilities I used a lot is you put up a giant fist, and if you parry an attack with that fist, time will freeze and you will just ass blast these dudes, just fist them into oblivion with like 100 punches, right? And it reduces the cooldown by like 50% of the ability if you manage to parry a skill. And there's several skills like that. If you manage to dodge a skill or an attack with this skill, then it'll lower the cooldown and do extra damage and stuff. And I love that because it, like I said, it prevents you from feeling like, Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's like, oh, I need to save most of my skills, right, until they're staggered. You don't really have that in this game because you can use your skills, your abilities, like throughout combat encounters, and then still have them ready for the stagger and still do significant amounts of damage even without any abilities at all, which I really, really like. I feel like that is the biggest complaint I've had with Final Fantasy VII Remake combat, and what I'm most fearful going back and playing in Rebirth in a couple months here in February is that oftentimes it feels like your normal attacks don't do anything, right? They're simply a means to an end. They're a means to get ATB so you can then attack with your abilities to do something, right? Or they're a means to build stagger so you can use your abilities that actually do something. And this game does not have that. You can not use abilities. You could not use abilities the entire game, and it would take you a bit longer, but assuming, you have your gear upgraded and you have good weapons, you could absolutely still fight any of the bosses or anything with no abilities at all. And that's just not something that I'd say is at all feasible for any of the other Final Fantasy games I've played. Maybe 15. I've heard 15 has a pretty similar combat, but once again, I haven't played that. So I really, really like that a lot about this game. And I think the gameplay in general is just super fun. It's really fun. I was constantly like, you can just run past encounters, so you don't have that random encounter thing. Like, you can see the enemies and be like, nah, I don't want to fuck with them right now or whatever. But I found myself constantly engaging in the combat because it was just so entertaining to do so. And I think that the combat is definitely the strength of the game. Getting into the cons now, one little con I do have with the combat, to just stay on this, is I do find it very easy. I think it's extremely easy. And once again, I 100% it. I did all of the notorious marks, all the hunts. I did everything. And I did find it very, very easy. There is a like Final Fantasy difficulty that's supposed to be significantly harder that you unlock once you complete the game, and I just kind of wish that was available from the get-go, because I did find myself kind of checking out a little bit and just kind of going on autopilot, because a lot of the encounters were just like trivial to me. I played on the action focused mode, and I didn't use any of the like accessibility like medallions or whatever, which will auto dodge or auto call in your dog and stuff like that. I didn't use any of those, and still I felt the game was very, very easy. I hardly ever struggled. I think I died like once the entire game, maybe twice. But yeah, I don't feel like it's even possible to fail a lot of the boss fights, you know? So I just felt it was very easy. Another con that I personally do not have this con, but I know a lot of people will, so I'm going to say it. But really, this could be a pro or a con. For me, it's kind of neutral, but I'm just kind of putting it in here because I've seen more people call it a con than a pro. This game is a lot of cutscenes. It's a ton of cutscenes. If you are like an anti-cutscene person, if you're one of those people, I know there's a lot of these people out here that are like, oh, in my free time, I'm choosing to play a video game. I want to play a video game. I don't want to watch a movie or a TV show. If I wanted to watch a movie or a TV show, I would simply boot up a movie or a TV show. I totally understand and respect that perspective. It's just one that I personally do not share. I am a cutscene enjoyer as long as they are interesting. And I think the cutscenes are done phenomenally in this game. You know, I saw a lot of criticism that people were like, oh, the boss fights are just cutscenes. And that's just not true. Most of the big boss fights in the game will have, you know, a section that is a cutscene with some QTEs, and then it will have the actual fight. There's no boss fight that I can think of in the entire game that is just a cutscene boss fight. I would 100% agree that would be lame as hell if that was the case. But every single boss fight, it does have a fighting mechanic to it. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed all of the cutscenes. Is it a little annoying that, you know, you have to press a button every now and then? It's like, hey, press square now. Sure, it can be a little dated. It can feel a little dated, but I mean, you're just pressing square, dude. It's not that big of a deal, at least in my opinion. So I don't think it's a con, but a lot of the game is cutscene, so just be prepared for that going in. And yeah, I didn't really mind it. I think the cutscenes are done incredibly well, especially in those like boss fight situations. They're awesome, man. A lot of the times I just felt like I was sitting back and watching like a Godzilla movie, you know, some kaiju battle movie, and it was fucking cool. I loved it. Another, and this is probably the biggest con for me, but another con is the side quests. The vast majority of side quests in the game are ass. They are just not good. There's literally like 4 or 5 side quests where all you do is like deliver meals to people. And yeah, you have a conversation with them, but it's like, it's not main characters that you're talking to. They're literally just side NPCs you'll never see again. And this is just like an example. Most of them are like fetch quests, or go here, talk to this person, and then they'll send you to talk to this person, and then you have to, you know, travel here, and you talk to one more person, and then you fight some stuff. But the stuff that you fight isn't particularly interesting because it's stuff you've probably already fought before. It might just be a different colored enemy, but same, you know, enemy nonetheless. And then, you know, you'll go about your day. And that's the vast majority of the side quests here. And when you look at the fact that it takes, you know, 20 to 25 hours to beat the game, but it took me 83 hours to do all the side quests and stuff, that's telling you that there's, you know, 3 to 4 times as much content in the side content and the side quests and the hunts and stuff like that than there is in the main content of the game. So in my opinion, you know, I see people and they say, oh, well, it's side content. You don't have to do it. I understand that. However, it is a majority of the content in the game. And to not evaluate a product based on stuff that is optional, but it is also simultaneously a majority of the content in the game, it just is a little silly to me, right? It's like, absolutely, it's side content, but it's a majority of the content. So it should most definitely be spoken about in a review. And I think that the majority of the side content is very lackluster. However, there are some really good side missions. I just wish there were more really good side missions, or I wish that they had cut out a lot of those sort of menial labor side missions. I mean, It's always kind of silly. It's like, oh, you're fighting to save the entire planet, but I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna go deliver, these two slaves some food, right? It's always kind of funny whenever that happens. And it sort of breaks up the pacing of the game, and that's what I'll say. It's very hard to talk about the pacing of a game like this because the side content inherently fucks the pacing of the game. And since I did all the side content, I can't really comment about, I have no idea how the game would play if you just did main story after main story, if the pacing would no longer be an issue. But if you do the side content, the pacing is most definitely an issue with the game, right? And there's nothing worse than it's like, all right, I'm ready to do the main story. I'm ready to progress. I just did 15 side quests. And then you go and it's like, oh, make sure, this is the final mission. Make sure you've done everything. And there's 15 more side quests. I mean, literally, I'm not even making this up. Before I'd done every single side content, all of the side content, I get that message about, this is the final mission. I'm like, oh, well, I already did all the side missions. I look, there is 11 more side quests that just unlocked. 11. And then, like, 3 or 4 of those led into another side quest. So there was, like, 15 side quests to do just before the main mission. It's like you build up to this, like, really, peak moment. And then it's like, yeah, but also, psych. And then it's obviously like, well, you want to do the side content because you want to get the good gear to go into the final boss fights, completely geared out of your mind. So you want to do it, but, that's an extra, 8 to 10 hours that you just added on to do all those side quests. But luckily, those side quests were actually very good. That's where the majority of the really good side quests were. But it's just an example, right? You'll be in the peak of the narrative, right? A really climactic point, and then you'll see, shit, there's like 8 side quests I have to do now. But I feel like that's kind of the case with all JRPGs. It was my problem with Final Fantasy VII as well. I feel like it's really hard to have an 80-hour game and have actual consistently engaging side content. And then the final con I'll talk about is the performance. I played on the PS5, obviously. It's all you can play on right now. And I played on the performance mode, which I thought would be a 60 FPS. It's not. It's not. In fact, it's hardly ever a 60 FPS unless you're inside and it's just you're talking to somebody. The vast majority of the time, it seems to be sitting at around 40 to 45 FPS, which for me is just icky gross, right? Coming from a PC gamer that's been playing at 144 hertz now for 6 years, actually going on 7 years now. I have a video on the channel, my first time playing 144 FPS, and I think that was like 6 or 7 years ago now. This is just gross, man. Like, for an action game like this, 60 FPS is what I would, ideally like to see. And while the game does look good, I have played games that look better, like the newest Plague Tale. That definitely looks significantly better than this game. I'd say Last of Us 2 looks better than this game. Hell, even Red Dead Redemption 2 can look better than this game. So I am just kind of sad to see that the performance is so lackluster, even on the performance mode. And a lot of times you can even see the resolution lowering in the game, like getting sub 1080p in order to try and push out as many frames as possible, and we're still like hitting 40. And there were some boss fights, when I talk about all the particle effects going on and stuff, there were some boss fights where it actually dropped down to like 15 FPS. Like, it was very nasty. I play on a monitor that will actually tell me the frames per second, and then OBS will also tell me, and I use a capture card. And there were moments, one boss fight in particular, this dude was throwing out a whole lot of elemental horse shit with lots of particle effects, and I threw down like a tornado, and I was throwing down abilities, and it went down to 15 FPS, which for me is just completely unacceptable. This is a PS5 we're talking about here. I'm expecting, 60 FPS consistently. That was the main selling point of the system, after all. And then, you play these games like Spider-Man 2 or whatever that are consistently 60. And, just playing this game, the performance is definitely lackluster. But the PC version will probably be announced in the next couple of weeks here. This only has a timed exclusive window until the 31st of this month. So hopefully come, 2024, we'll actually see that PC version be released, and I'm sure it'll run buttery smooth on there. But overall, this is my favorite Final Fantasy game, and I know that's controversial to some people. It seems like if you're a big Final Fantasy fan, then you probably don't like this game very much. But if you're like me and not a big Final Fantasy fan, I absolutely loved and adored my time with the game. Other than the lackluster side content and the performance, I really, really liked my time with it. I thought the gameplay was great. The voice acting was fantastic. And then the vast majority of the main story was really, really entertaining as well. So for me, I'm going to give the game a solid 8.5 out of 10. My rating scale, in case you don't know, a 5 is average, 6 is above average, 7 is good, 8 is great, and 9 is amazing. 10 is like a near perfect masterpiece, right? I think this game is definitely better than Final Fantasy VII, and Final Fantasy VII, I gave an 8. So for me, it's at an 8.5. It's better for sure, but I do still have some gripes with it that bring it down a little bit for me. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to be cranking out the rest of the reviews for this year. So stay tuned for that. Reviewing some older stuff. I'm going to be reviewing Hi-Fi Rush. I'm going to be reviewing Ghost Runner 2. And I'm going to be reviewing the God of War Valhalla DLC as well. So anyway, that's going to do it for me. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.